Hello, everyone. This is Veronica Kirilenko of the New American. As you know, the state of Virginia, where I live, has flipped its House of Delegates red this past November. We also got a Republican executive branch of the state in a massive rebuke to the Democrats. Today, we have an honor to speak with Jason Miyares, our Attorney General-elect, who promised to bring law and order back to the Commonwealth. Mr. Miyares, thank you for being with us today.
Great to be with you, Veronica. It's a new day in Virginia, and it's been a great, obviously, election day. Obviously, we're now in the process of trying to put together a new team for a new day in the Commonwealth. We're excited to get started and really happy to join you.
Well, congratulations on your victory, first of all. And let's talk a little bit about the general political landscape in Virginia. You know, it has changed dramatically over the past year. The Democrats have been dominating the state elections for almost a decade. And just a year ago, Joe Biden, a Democrat, won the Commonwealth by a 10-point margin. And here we are today. In your opinion, what was the reason for such a change in Virginians' political preferences?
Well, I like to say Virginia is not a red or blue state, it's a common sense state. And I think you had a lot of people that were frustrated what they were seeing happening in Richmond. If you followed, there's been kind of one party unchecked, kind of a far left liberal monopoly in Richmond with one party rule that really pushed on almost every issue, particularly on public safety, which was a big issue in my race. But on every issue you can imagine, they push really, really far to the left. Higher taxes, carbon tax, grocery taxes, gas taxes, the early release of violent offenders out of prison early, sometimes not even notifying the families of the victims, a murder rate the highest been in several decades. And so you thought Virginians really pushing back and saying too much, too fast, too soon. We want a check and balance. We do not want this far left monopoly in Richmond. I think that's one. So one was a reaction to Richmond. The other, I think, was a reaction to Washington. It was a state that President Biden won by 10 points. But I think there was a reaction to what they saw with the trillions and trillions in spending, obviously an incredibly weak foreign policy where we're having to evacuate embassies under the cover of gunfire, and inflation where everything was costing more. And I think there was a collective sense of trying to send out a message, not just to Richmond, but also a message to Washington as well. I think the message was delivered. We'll see if Washington kind of changes some of their habits. I'm a little skeptical. But I think it was a combination of both the message to Richmond and message to Washington. A lot of common sense Virginians did not want to see this far left monopoly that was in power in Richmond kind of continue to push an agenda, I think, pretty out of step with where most Virginians were.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things on the Washington D.C. agenda is obviously the vaccine mandates, and we're not talking about the vaccine itself, but about the mandates. And I wanted to ask you, that at least 23 GOP attorneys general sued the Biden administration over its COVID vaccine or test mandate for the larger employers. It's called the OSHA regulation. Numerous states successfully challenged the vaccination mandate for the federal employees and contractors, and also the healthcare workers at Medicare and Medicaid affiliated facilities. Do you plan to join any of the ongoing litigations over the requirements, or file maybe any similar lawsuits yourself?
I have a working group that is looking at the filed legislation. I will tell you a couple of things. One, I am pro-vaccine. I'm vaccinated, and so is my family. But I think that's a decision I made for myself in consultation both with my doctors and my own research. And I believe very much in individual dignity and individual freedom. And so let's just say I'm highly skeptical that OSHA was ever intended to be used in a manner to force a vaccine on a private employer and their private employees. And so I am skeptical let's just say I'm highly skeptical. I'm a big measure twice, cut once. I have a team looking at this. I'm not in power yet. Let's just say I'm going to look at this very, very closely and make a very quick decision shortly after I get sworn in on January 15th. But I have a high level skepticism that OSHA actually has this power that the president insists that they do.
Mm-hmm. So how probable, what's let's say,
I'll let your listeners read between the lines what I just said. I think they can pretty much get a good idea from that.
Okay, sounds good. Let's talk about the Loudoun County scandals that shook so many parents nationwide, not just in Virginia. So you vote to investigate the Loudoun County School Board's alleged misconduct surrounding two sexual assaults allegations that occurred in the public schools and were brought forth in the county. So what kind of plans do you have moving forward, given the school-related issues were arguably one of the utmost importance for the voting parents and common sense Virginians, like you said?
Well, just to give you background, and this issue is a great example of this out-of-touch far-left monopoly and laws passed in Richmond directly impacting people's local communities and local schools. There's a bill that was passed in 2020. The Senate amended it and it passed HB 257, which ended the mandatory reporting requirement of sexual assault in schools, where previously you had to report to the police. You cannot leave it up to the discretion of school administrators or principals. And when it passed, we begged the governor to veto it. We said this is going to create victims. We begged the people on the other side of the aisle, the Democrats, not to push this bill. They did anyway. What happened not even a year later, a ninth grade girl walking to a bathroom was the victim of a horrific sexual assault. The individual later pled guilty, but what happened is they just took the perpetrator, who transferred simply to another public school also in Loudoun, where a second ninth grade girl walked into a bathroom where another alleged assault took place. And so there's so many more questions than answers. The superintendent claims he didn't know. The sheriff, Chapman, who's very, very sharp, said that's factually incorrect. The school board said that there were no alleged sexual assaults that had taken place in any bathroom, despite the fact there seems to be some email evidence that indicates they absolutely knew what was going on. And so you have a fundamental right to a quality education under the Virginia Constitution. And so that the first step of having a quality education is your safety. And if that's being violated, that goes into my purview. And I'm going to be investigating the Loudoun School Board and get some of these answers, because it just came out this week and charged $36,000 in a FOIA request that concerned parents in Loudoun had filed to figure out what they knew and when they knew it. And I'm not going to be charging the general public for me to get to the truth of what happened, I can assure you. So that's going to be one of my biggest initiatives from day one, is get an answer. And we're going to get an answer, get a clear idea, to hold people accountable. And the idea of transparency, which so often never followed in government. But the second is to make sure future superintendents, future school boards don't ever make the same mistake again, and don't play politics with our kids' safety.
Yes, well, yes. Thank you for this initiative, because no parent wants to send their children to school and worry about their safety. It's something very crucial. Sir, you also said that you're planning to introduce a bill to the General Assembly that would allow the Attorney General's office to intervene in cases where a county prosecutor isn't handling the case well. So your ultra-liberal critics were quick to condemn the initiative, calling it an undemocratic overreach and abuse of power. What's your response to that?
Well, what they fail to realize is it's not uncommon. I actually have the Attorney General has original jurisdiction on a host of crimes, including child pornography, internet crimes, a variety of different fraud crimes as well. What this would do is what the current law says is if a Commonwealth's attorney requests, an Attorney General can come in, Attorney General's office can come in and prosecute a case that perhaps requires a certain level of sophistication or capacity they can't handle. What this would create would be a concurrent jurisdiction where when you have one of these far left prosecutors that decide they're going to just not prosecute certain categories of crime, that the chief of police or the sheriff's, the duly elected sheriff of that locality can come to the attorney general and say, listen, our prosecutor isn't willing to do their job. Will you look at this case and give me the ability? And, you had a case in Fairfax County. We had one of these far left prosecutors that got elected, where you had a 5-year-old child who was a victim of a horrific child rape over the course of a year. They were raped and molested over the course of a year. The individual was eligible for a life sentence. The Fairfax prosecutor thought a life sentence for a child rapist was too harsh, and he dropped some of the worst charges, reduced it to a 17-year agreed plea deal over the objection of the family of the victim. And because of geriatric parole, this perpetrator is eligible for parole in 10 years, potentially 10 years for a child rapist. I find that unconscionable. And if you're not willing to do your job, then my office is going to step in and do your job for you. I think that's common sense for a lot of Virginians. And we look forward to trying to get this legislation through. We do have a Democratic Senate, so we're hoping a couple of Democrats will see the light and go tackle it that way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, sir. Let's talk about Second Amendment rights. In the past 2 years, Virginia and many other states witnessed record numbers of new gun owners, especially among women and minorities. It's connected, of course, was connected to COVID-related lockdowns, economic uncertainties, worsening crime rate, murder rate, like you already mentioned. So those factors were perhaps among top ones that drove those numbers up. So do you support restoring and expanding certain gun rights of law-abiding citizens? For example, will you instruct the superintendent of police to enter into new reciprocity agreements with other states?
Yeah, well, some of that's decisions by the governor, but for me, I believe in reciprocity. I think that's important. I know the previous attorney general tried to get rid of reciprocity, save for North Carolina, and I thought it was a disaster. Listen, if you want to lower violence, you don't go after innocent, law-abiding Virginians who are trying to exercise their constitutional rights. You go after the violent criminals that use guns in the commission of felonies. That's how you lower violence. And so that's my mindset. My mindset is the people that should feel fear are not innocent Virginians who've done nothing wrong. The people that should feel fear are those criminals that are using guns in felonies, robbing people and committing mayhem. Those individuals should be the ones that feel fear. And if to show you how different the mindset is, the current attorney general that's there now, there used to be a great program called Project Exile that was run through the attorney general's office in conjunction with the U.S. attorney's office, where if you use a gun in a felony, you would work with the U.S. attorney's office to go 5-year mandatory minimum. And it was very effective to go after gang violence and people using guns to commit robberies and murders and other instances. Well, the previous administration had a requirement that said if you're an illegal immigrant that uses a gun in the commission of a felony, you have to be reported to ICE. And the Attorney General Herring turned down that money because he couldn't comply with that. I guess he thought that was too harsh. If there's anybody that should be deported, it should be somebody that's an illegal immigrant using a gun in a felony. My goodness. And so it is such a different mindset. I believe in the Second Amendment. It's the Second Amendment for a reason. I believe that you have an individual right to protect yourself and your family. It's not about hunting. It is an individual right. It's one of our, under the Treaty of Liberty, it's a very important aspect of that. And so I support that. And I'm going to go after the violent criminals. I'm not going to go after innocent gun owners.
So I suppose should the legislature agree, you would support the return of the state preemption laws in Virginia and also would support the Castle Doctrine and constitutional carry. Will you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there has to be uniformity. You cannot have Arlington passing a host of gun control measures that nobody's familiar with. The story I like to share is if I have a friend in Richmond who wants to go visit his friend in Virginia Beach and go to a shooting range, and on the way to Virginia Beach, they pass through Newport News or Hampton to get to Virginia Beach, and they suddenly pass a gun ban, and this individual has no idea, and he stopped at an innocent traffic stop. He has no idea he suddenly committed a felony because that locality. So there has to be uniformity to our gun laws, and that's what I would push the General Assembly to ensure, because otherwise it creates a patchwork and actually, again, turns innocent Virginians that have done nothing wrong suddenly overnight into felons. I have a serious problem with that, and it's something I would absolutely work to make sure is the case.
Sir, I know our time is limited, so I'm going to ask you one last question. As a Virginian who owns a sports car, so Virginia is the only state in the nation that bans radar detectors, and this ban was implemented in 1962, and it is still on the books in Virginia, while every other state, except for Washington, D.C., got rid of it. Does it make sense to revisit and perhaps retire this 60-year-old law now?
I agree with you. I think they should. I think the General Assembly is going to have to take that up, and I would support the Assembly and the governor signing that into law. I think it's clearly an antiquated. It's kind of an antiquated system, and a lot of people have apps on their phones that can alert them where if there's police on the road as well. So I think it's kind of antiquated. I think technology's surpassed it, and I think its time has probably come. If 49 other states have banned it, I don't see any reason why Virginia can't be the 50th.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Miyares. It's been a pleasure, and we really wish you luck for taking the office. You said January 15th. We're looking forward to it. And once again, congratulations on your victory, and Merry Christmas to you and your family.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you, Veronica. Happy New Year. Have a great time. Okay.
Thank you.
God bless you.